actually, I should first thank both our discussants for a very thoughtful set of comments and original analysis, actually. Starting with the last point that's been raised about the numbers. So you're right. The unit costs that we're using, we do use ADB projects, and ADB projects do tend to, there's more attention being paid to safeguard issues, environmental audits, etc. But in some sense, it's something you do want to do, actually. So one could argue that it's more expensive, but on the other hand, it's also something that you would want to do. We thought about investment needs from another perspective. You're right. I mean, essentially, we've taken the relationship of the past, extrapolated to the future. But another thing one can do is say, okay, look, we take China. China is the one economy which has really invested a lot, and we say, okay, if you look at the infrastructure services that the average Chinese citizen enjoys, and compared to what the average OECD country citizen enjoys, what's the gap? So we work this out, and it's huge. Just some examples are, if you look at urban water sewerage pipes, China's numbers are controlling for population, of course. It's only 17% of what's there in Japan. Sanitation, again, just 18%. Roads, Zhigang has done these calculations very carefully. He's looked at adjusting for the quality of roads, and you find that in the case of roads, Zhigang would be required to actually bring things to that quality level of OECD, and you use actually the Chinese numbers for road construction, not even the OECD numbers, so even using those. Power sector, China is at 46% of the average OECD economy in terms of just the availability of power, kilowatts of energy. So when we looked at this other way of doing things, we found, this is actually considerably less. And what it's doing is, it's basically, we're starting off with a set of very simple growth projections, really. There's a convergence factor built in, and then we're looking at this past relationship. So to that extent, the point you raised is right, that if in the future you're going to be able to deliver all these things much cheaper or in different ways, then yes. And that's an exercise, in fact, we do want to think about, and that's where engaging with academia and just how do you model that? How do you model these disruptive technologies? In fact, with the VP, we've been discussing precisely this issue. How is that going to affect things? We would love to think about taking that into account and really work with you on things like that. I'm losing track of the issues. Zhigang, did you, something on SOEs?
So I just add a little bit of a detail on these measurement issues, also related to the questions. So the first one on the SOEs. So for a number of Asian countries, we do not have good data on SOEs measurements. But for three large economies, we do have a very comprehensive measure. So the first one is for China. So for China, the Statistics Bureau provides comprehensive data that covers investments by governments, SOEs, and private enterprises. Our difficulty is we cannot break down the investments by SOEs and governments and private for China. But we do have the total number of investments. And then that's related to the second question, how do we infer the private? So we have the total investments for the China, and then for the private, we take the World Bank database on private investments. That's project level database. So we just aggregate the numbers to get the private investment. So the issue with this approach is that database by the World Bank does not cover 100% of the private investments. So in some sense, when you look at China, the private is very small. That partly could be because some private investments is not included. So in that sense, it's a lower bound estimate. Of course, for Indonesia and for India, we have a very detailed information on the investment by different investment parties. So for these three countries, we are very confident that the measurements of SOEs and privates are included. And I think the last question of the question raised by Albert. So we try everything in this report. At the beginning of our exercise, we try exactly this approach he suggests. We take the historical physical data, for example, the length of the kilometers of a roads, okay, and then apply our unit cost and see whether we can match the numbers, the physical road length and the values. But we found there are a lot of data issues. For example, you look at the roads, the kilometers of roads, that's a stock. In order to do that calculation, we need the flow of the road, the changes. And then there's the quality of information is not good. For example, you look at some countries like the length of roads actually could change over time. Because when the Statistics Bureau report the thing, they're reporting the actual use of roads, how many kilometers of roads are in use, right? So it could actually increase or decrease. We don't really know what's the actual change. So these are small things, but we did try, and in the future we'll try to get better quality of data, try to improve our estimates, because we do these reports in a very limited time. So there's a lot of scope for improvement.